What's going on, everybody? This is Sanitary 103. Thank you for watching another video. So in this installment, I'm going to go over the top 10 ways to reduce your blood pressure. Now, before I go over this list, I wanted to briefly talk about high blood pressure. Now, having high blood pressure is often labeled the silent killer. And the reason for that is that there are no really clear-cut signs or symptoms of having high blood pressure. And if you don't monitor your blood pressure closely, it can lead to catastrophic things such as brain damage, heart damage, kidney damage, or even stroke. So because of this, you definitely want to keep an eye out on your blood pressure. Now, I'm sure each and every one of you has gotten your blood pressure taken at one time or another if you went to a doctor's office. And there's basically a top number and a bottom number. Now, I will put a chart at the top of this video to show you what is considered, good blood pressure, so you can have an idea of what is considered healthy blood pressure. But basically, the top number is called the systolic number, and the systolic number represents the amount of pressure that the blood is pushing up against your arteries and your vessels while your heart is beating. So to put this in layman terms, just remember that the top number represents the amount of pressure when the heart is beating, and the bottom number, which is the diastolic number, that represents the amount of pressure similar to the systolic number, but when the heart is at rest. So the top number, pressure when the heart is beating, and the bottom number, the pressure when the heart is at rest. Now, what exactly does this mean? So according to the chart that you see right now, for the top number, you want to be pretty much anywhere between 110 and 120. And the bottom number, you want to be between 70 and 80. Now, these standards are for people that are 18 years or older. If you are under 18, be sure to, go online and you can find out the numbers accordingly. But for most adults, you want to be 120 over 80 or 110 over 70. Now that you got a brief introduction to blood pressure, let's go over this top 10 list. Now, the first thing that you can do to reduce your blood pressure is to exercise regularly. Even if you work out like 3 or 4 times a week, between 30 minutes to an hour, it's been proven that if you do this, you can lower your blood pressure by between 4 to 9 millimeters of mercury. The second tip is to have a healthy diet. It's been proven that if you eat a diet that has fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and you eat as wholesome as possible, it can reduce your blood pressure by up to 14 millimeters of mercury, so definitely try to eat healthy. The third tip is to reduce your sodium/salt intake. Now, if you're under 50 years old, you probably don't want to exceed around 2,300 milligrams of sodium per day. You also want to try to stay away from processed food, a lot of the TV dinners, the cup of noodles, potato chips, basically anything processed typically has a lot of salt. That's going to elevate your blood pressure. The other thing that I recommend is try not to add too much salt to your food. Now, this kind of sucks, I understand, especially when food tastes bland, but there are a lot of other healthy alternatives. You can use a lot of different spices, cayenne pepper, paprika, Old Bay seasoning. There's a lot of different seasonings, so go to your local grocery store and look for a lot of the different seasonings and Mrs. Dash, and make sure you read the label. And a lot of them have hardly any sodium, any salt content, and they still make food taste really good. So definitely try to minimize the salt and sodium intake. The fourth tip is to cut down on the alcohol. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys and gals do like to booze up. Every once in a while is okay. And it's been proven that if you have like 1 or 2 small drinks, it's actually good for your heart. But anything that you go overboard in, it can be pretty bad, and alcohol is no exception. So if you're going to drink alcohol, limit it to 1 or 2 drinks. That's good for your heart, like I mentioned. But try to, minimize the binge drinking, because that can definitely increase your blood pressure, and that's something you don't want. The fifth tip is to avoid smoking and or all tobacco products. This is pretty self-explanatory. You've all seen the anti-smoking campaigns on TV. I'm not going to get too much into it, but blood pressure is no exception. If you smoke too much, it increases your blood pressure. And it's been proven that even if you have a last smoke, usually within an hour after, your blood pressure is still elevated. So cut out the smoking completely. Having one here and there socially, I guess, isn't a bad thing, but if you're the type of person who has relapsed from smoking, you want to stay away from it completely. Tip number 6 is to cut down on the caffeine. Caffeine has been proven to create an immediate spike in your blood pressure upon drinking it. Although it's been said that usually within an hour it kind of tapers down. So the best way to see if caffeine is definitely affecting your blood pressure is to take your blood pressure before you have a caffeinated drink, then have the caffeinated drink, and then like an hour after, see how much it elevated. If it elevates quite a bit, then it's possible you are caffeine sensitive, and you probably should try to at least cut down on the soda and the coffee. Tip number 7 is to reduce your stress. This is something that I have to deal with from time to time. I'm sure everybody has a bad day, but definitely try to, not take things too seriously. Take a deep breath, take 5 minutes, take a break, do some meditation, do some yoga. Try to definitely lower your stress levels, because if you don't, that's going to lead to high blood pressure. Tip number 8 is to get some support from friends and family. Like a lot of things that you got to deal with, by having a strong network of friends and family, you can be held accountable. You can have a reason to monitor your blood pressure, and by doing that, hopefully you can keep it lowered. Tip number 9 is to regulate your blood pressure at home or at the doctor's office regularly. This will not directly reduce your blood pressure, but once again, like having a good network of friends, by closely monitoring it and being on top of things, you'll have a better idea of where your blood pressure is, and you can implement a lot of the tips that I mentioned before to keep the blood pressure down and make those adjustments. Last but not least is tip number 10, and that is to go on medication. Now, going on medication to me is kind of a last resort. However, if tips 1 through 9 are not working effectively, then you might have to go on medication. This is something not to be taken lightly. Now, if your readings are consistently higher than what they need to be, they're in the 140/90, the 150, 160, you name it, the higher the worse it is, then that might be out of your hands and you need to go on medication. This isn't to say that when you are on medication that you should ignore all the other tips that I mentioned. You should definitely implement those tips along with the medication. Hopefully by doing this, you can wean off the medication and naturally get your blood pressure back to normal. Thanks once again for watching another video, and just remember that blood pressure is not to be taken lightly. There are no signs, there are no symptoms, so you want to definitely monitor it. The comments and the questions are always welcome, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.